I would like to bring this meeting to order of the Planning Board, September 19th, 2022. You'll stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice. I'm going to make a motion that we approve amend the agenda for tonight slightly and move up out of new business item A, which is PSP 22-01. It's a final subdivision plat, and go ahead and hear that first, and then we'll follow that with old business signs. Could I get a second?
I'll second that.
Thank you, Tony. All in favor?
Aye.
No. Okay. Moving on, approval of minutes. We have the May 19th minutes, which we were waiting to be corrected. Wes was out for a bit there, and so those have been updated. He and I talked earlier because we had maybe missed something, but if you look on page 12 of those minutes, at line 487, from 487 to 490 was down below. It was a little bit out of order as far as the meeting goes, so it's in its proper place now. 497 through 494 has been corrected and added to the new minutes. Anybody have a problem with that? Okay. Well, I will entertain a motion to approve these minutes as corrected, the May 19th meeting.
I have a correction.
Oh, sorry, Jan, thanks.
Yes, sorry, in line 155, where I was quoted as saying that I had built 2 houses in Southern Shores. No, we had 2 houses, one in Kitty Hawk, one in Southern Shores, but they all had that 30% lot coverage restriction.
Okay.
Just because the 3 houses were Kitty Hawk, third one was Southern Shores. This correct correction, that's all.
So where is it that you want 155?
Yes, 155, page 4.
Okay. I'm missing the 3.
I don't see it.
It's 3 houses versus.
If you go
Oh,
to
shit, yeah.
57, yeah. you see that.
Okay, so you want the 3 houses taken out, or how would you amend it, I guess, for Wes?
She built a house in Southern Shores with the same restrictions.
Yeah, okay, okay. All right, with those 2, or with that correction, along with what is currently in good shape on page 12, I would entertain a motion to approve those minutes with the correction.
Yeah. I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the planning board on May 19th, 2022, with the amended corrections.
Seconded.
Linda, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of those approvals, raise your hand. Aye. Opposed, none. Okay, then the next set of minutes is the August 15th, 2022. Anybody have any corrections on those?
I have on 203, it's page 5. I have 2 corrections on that page, or additions rather than corrections. where I asked about the aggrieved party can ask all the questions they would like. It does not have to be their attorney. I also questioned them about chain of custody, and he said it usually only applies to criminal cases and may not, probably will not apply to this case. So I asked him 3 questions, actually, and I asked him if chain of custody was applicable, and he stated it's usually criminal cases and probably would not be applicable at this case. And then on 223, planning board member Lawler stated he was aware in a rough way, and myself and Linda Burke stated they were not aware whatsoever of the appeal. I think that should be added.
So may I just ask, the first about the chain of custody and
Yeah.
usually are criminal cases and not applicable in this case. Are you suggesting that go in between 200 or 203 and 205?
Yes, and it may not be applicable in this case unless somebody, well, I'm not going to get into it. If somebody submits something, there could be a chain of custody issue, but it's very doubtful, he said, in this case.
All right, so Tony DiBernardo, Vice Chairperson DiBernardo asked if
Chain of custody was applicable,
chain of custody was applicable.
and
And then
the
John,
attorney said it's usually only criminal cases, unlikely to be applicable in this case. I think unlikely is the key thing. I doubt if it will be.
and then the next revision,
Is down at 223, where planning board member Lawler stated he is aware in a rough way.
Mhm.
And DiBernardo and Burke stated they were not aware of it at all, of any appeal. We were not aware of any information.
thank you. And I'll put that at the end of 223.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept those 2 corrections by Vice Chair DiBernardo. Can I get a second?
I'll second it.
Oh, was there any more discussion on anybody? Okay. You got what you needed out there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I just thought that was
All right.
important, especially that we weren't aware.
A motion in a second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Okay. Gets us caught up on minutes. Okay, we are going to go into PCP 22-01. I think the applicant is here tonight. And Wes, I'm going to have you start us off by telling us why we're here on this issue.
Yes, sir. If y'all will recall, you all reviewed and approved a preliminary plat to subdivide the property at 267 Hillcrest Drive. In this case, it is the same. Nothing has changed other than the conditions that were recommended that the final plat included. So what you have in your packets is a copy of the final plat. And you'll see that the certificates, the conditions you all recommended to council ultimately, they did approve the preliminary plat with the conditions you all recommended. And the surveyor made those changes in the conditions. And on this final plat, you'll see where it has the approval of planning board or approval of town council. And they removed the reference to recombination because this is a subdivision. Other than that, all the information is still the same. The lot sizes are still the same. The lot widths is still the same. All the applicable requirements referenced in the staff report. Everything is the same. The only thing that's changed is that this is now a final plat. The conditions were addressed. So the next step in the process is, as a subdivision that's not eligible for an exemption, the planning board has to approve the final plat, then the town council has to approve the final plat. And if and when that does occur, if you all do approve it and then council approves it, then the property owner will be given a Mylar copy of the plat by the surveyor, which is a different material Mylar. And that's the document that'll actually be signed by Mr. Chairman, mayor, property owner, surveyor will put a seal on it and information. And then that document is what's recorded at the courthouse to put the subdivision in effect.
Okay. Thank you, Wes.
Yes, town staff recommends approval of the final plat as presented.
Okay. Would the applicant wish to speak? Mr. Casale? Okay. Okay.
I guess the only question I have is if you do approve it in Mylar, do I need to take that to, or how does that get recorded? Do I need to do something with that, or?
If it is approved, if council approves it, it'll be on their upcoming agenda, October 4th, I believe. You would be responsible for obtaining the signatures, and you or who, I mean, staff, we don't take it to the Register of Deeds. You would take it to the Register of Deeds office, and that's where it's recorded.
I'll take, do I have to find Mr. Ward?
You could drop it off here, and we'll give the, we'll have the signatures apply.
Drive it to Manny?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Okay, everybody had a chance to take a look at this. It's pretty much, what was asked at the last meeting to remove the exemption certificate on the preliminary plat was removed. And then all the requirements for the plat itself have been shown on the revised plat. So I sure didn't see anything that we didn't ask for, not included. Anybody pick up on anything that they're concerned with? Okay. Well, we will need a motion to approve
Yes, sir.
as written or
Yes.
as stated.
As presented, yeah.
Okay. Could I get a motion to approve this plat to be submitted to the town council for their approval and next month's meeting? Anybody?
So
Ed?
moved.
Thank you. Second?
Second.
Linda, thank you. So we have a motion and a second to approve this. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, well, you're good to go on our end. Okay.
Okay, yes, sir.
You might as well stick around. This is going to be fun here. Just kidding. Okay. Out of the way. Signs, Wes, you want to catch us up to speed on what we're doing with hopefully this final rendition of signs?
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. The next item on your agenda is ETA 2108. As you all recall, the board considered this application on October 18, 2021, and recommended approval of to the town council. This is another version, obviously. The town council considered the application at the November 9, 2021 town council meeting. During the public hearing that was held, there were several comments from folks, and the town council voted to send the application back to town staff and the planning board for revisions. And one specific revision that they included in the motion and in the vote is that that the revised version include allowing signs in the town right-of-way during campaign season. Town staff, since then, town staff has also made several revisions, and they include allowing temporary signs in the town right-of-way during campaign season with permission of the adjacent property owner or owners, as directed by council. They did not request that part about the permission of adjacent property owners. That's something that I think we had discussed in one of the meetings we were in. Revise the requirements for signs on properties that are for sale or lease. Revise the definition of sign. Revise the definition of temporary sign. Revise the requirements for signs at major entrances to subdivisions. Revise the requirements for wall signs in the commercial zoning district. And revise the requirements for temporary signs in all zoning districts. I forgot to mention prior to getting into this that town staff worked on this as well as the town attorney, former town attorney Ben Gallup. And one of his last to-dos for the town prior to his leaving the firm was to go through this. I had some specific questions. He provided feedback on those questions and any other concerns that he had. So this version, this draft here, for the most part, is he was okay with. I made some of the revisions that I've listed were in response to his comments. So Mr. Gallup did look at it. He did provide comments prior to his departure. Mr. Hornthal, Philip Hornthal, the town's new current attorney, he has not seen it, but he was involved in the communications with Mr. Gallup prior to his departure. So I can try to answer any questions that you all may have. Town staff is recommending approval, or that you all recommend approval to the town council, and that is consistent with the town's currently adopted land use plan.
Okay, thank you, Wes. What I wouldn't mind doing, if everyone will get their copy and just briefly want to flip through it and see if we've got what we, asked Wes to work on since the last time, which was a good while ago. So this is actually the fourth version that we have looked at. So I think we're real close, but I have a few things, and I'm sure some of you have a few questions too. So first page, what always pops out to me, there's a lot of whereases on always in town parlance, but line 22 where it says, whereas the town desires neutral content design standards. That's why we are here working on this so diligently. And it's been confusing trying to, make sure that we're not singling out one sign over the other. So I think this certainly has done a good job in that endeavor. And then the next line says that permitted signs reflect the aesthetics desired by its residents. I'm a firm believer in that. Less signs is more, as far as I'm concerned. I think a lot of townspeople would have the same opinion. Okay, so let's go to page 2. Wes, you had defined a banner, a flag, and a pendant from previous discussions. I think those definitions are good, but what I glean out of the definition of pendant is it's not really a sign, is it?
No, sir, it's not. If you look down in the definition of sign that starts
Right.
on line 20 on the same page, you'll see pendant is struck out.
Yeah, not tried. So just what Wes said on line 22, pendant is struck out. So my question is, do we want to possibly put some type of square footage on a pendant? Because right now it can be any size, and it's not a sign. So I certainly think something around the size of a typical campaign sign, which is 3 square feet, wouldn't be too unreasonable. Does anybody have any ideas about pennants? And should we put some type of square footage on that?
If I can comment on, Mr. Chairman, if you don't mind. The only instance that I'm aware of and recall where we had pennants string with triangular, as is defined, was when Food Line did one of their 2 or 3 remodels they've done over the past 10 years. They had them strung across the front of the store. But they were all, the triangles themselves were small, but it was a long string
Yeah.
that went from one end of the front to the other end. But I can't recall where folks have hung pennants. I mean, I'm sure it's been done before, but
No, I
just
can't
FYI.
either. No, I mean, I don't think it would be a problem, but if we had 3 square feet in there or some number, I mean, I can,
There'd be a lot of little triangles.
or one big triangle. I mean, you could certainly have a giant triangle if you wanted it. I don't know. I mean, I know if you are ambiguous or not inclusive, sometimes it can bite you.
So each tenant would be restricted to that, because what you say with a string of them, obviously that exceeds that. And you're thinking like the 4th of July, you'll see the red, white, and blue pennants hanging. And those will be also strung around, just for the occasion. But that would exceed your 3 square feet.
True.
So the question would be, you have to put that measurement per pennant versus your string of pennants.
Once again, I don't have the answer. I'm just
Right.
bringing it up for discussion. I can certainly take it or leave it, but I would like to, since it's not qualified as a sign, kind of, I mean, you could have a pennant that's half the size from that flag back to that wall. You could.
So pennant is no text on it, is that what you're saying?
No, it can have, you can have text. It's,
So, Wes, I have a question
Could
about
it have,
pennants, if I can. So, since it's not a sign, pennants aren't regulated at all. Is that correct?
in this current version, that's correct.
Okay, so we can put a limit on it, but then we've also got to include where it's allowed. We have to call it a sign and put it in here if we're going to give it a size limitation, then we have to start calling it a sign and we have to put it all in here, because as it is now, there's no regulations.
I don't think you'd have to call it a sign. Still, I mean, I don't see where it needs to be a sign, no more so than that it's a triangular or.
I'm just saying it's not, pennants aren't included in the code at all.
That's right. Yeah. So,
So defining one, we're gonna have to put some code in there that says it can't be any. You're right, we don't have to call it a sign, but we could say, as part of this ordinance, pennants may not be any longer than this. They can only be up temporarily, blah, blah, blah.
would it still not be a sign if we put a square foot size on the pen?
I think if you were to propose or recommend requirements and regulate them, I think that it should be considered a sign.
Well, and that's where we don't want to go, because that was certainly our intent, was not to, preclude people from putting, seasonal pennants in their yards. I mean, that's what we don't want to do. So once it becomes a sign, then we got to find a place for it.
Yeah, if you want to come up with a regulation such as size or length or whatever, I would suggest it would need to be considered a sign in the definition, And we would, like Mr. McClendon said, find where you want to allow them or where you want to regulate them.
That, to me, I would rather stay away from that
Yeah.
if at all possible. I mean, I guess we take our lumps with a, 45 square foot pennant.
The likelihood of that is pretty.
Yeah, you're right.
Pretty small,
You're
so
right.
I don't see where,
True. Okay, then it's just something I had on that page.
can I interrupt?
Yeah, sure.
The next word is captive balloon. And then if you go to page 6, it says that what's prohibited is signs supported in whole or in part by water, air, or gas. That's a balloon. Unless we're talking about politicians maybe, but other than that, that's a balloon.
Those things that, that go up
Yeah,
and
the
down in
things
car.
that go up and down or, so basically what we're having here where we say sign means, and we're including that in as permitted on page 2, but then on page 6, we're saying it's not permitted. I mean, it doesn't say balloon. Granted, it does not say balloon, but it says water, air, or gas, something supported by that. Ergo, it's a balloon of some type. So if we're restricting that, I would just maybe line out captive balloon, or if you want to have that, then take that off of the restricted. That's basically, because if if somebody's reading this, they'd say, what? I can't have a balloon? And then they read the thing and they says, oh, you can. So it's kind of contradictory, those two statements. So did it say, what, do we want to scratch out captive balloon? Or do we want to remove the balloon from restricted?
I don't think that the definition of a sign would have any bearing on whether that sign is permitted or not permitted. So, I mean, as far as leaving it in the definition, and then, what line is it on page 6, Tony?
On page 6, it's line 7. It says signs supported in whole or in part by water, air, or gas,
Are prohibited.
or
So-
prohibited.
So that covers,
Then, but see, I'm
Yeah,
just talking about somebody picking this up.
Yeah.
They would be confused.
it's
It would be
redundant that
yeah.
it's allowed in the definition,
But
but
then
not
in the
in
res-
principle.
Yes, so I just think to make it
Yeah,
clarified, clarify for somebody picking this up and looking at it. I mean, I could see somebody picking it up and say, oh, look, I can have a balloon.
Well, then.
I would
are you
scratch
saying Suggesting scratch
captive balloon, yeah.
Does that make sense, Wes?
Your input is, it's great. You see
I
where
mean,
it's.
I don't think we're allowing it, that certainly, it's just, it may be confusing that it's.
It says
in the
it's a
definition.
sign, yeah, and then we say you can't have it.
Well, a
Why?
sign, does a sign have, is something with text, makes it a sign?
Mhm. Yeah.
So if you have balloons or if you have pennants, it's not considered a sign.
But it's under the definition of, yeah.
Well, that's what I'm.
It could be, like the definition says, it doesn't have to have text and still be considered a sign
Mhm.
by definition.
Part of the definition, to me, says a captive balloon. Well, that means that's a sign.
Mhm.
And you have to follow whatever the sign ordinance is.
Right.
And if we take it out, then it doesn't apply to all of these other things. Does that kind of
I
make
don't-
sense? It's like, yes, if you put up a mini hot air balloon,
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing.
Yeah.
you're going for. There's a big hot air balloon that says Fred's Hot Dogs or whatever. That's considered a sign.
Mhm.
You're gonna have to meet the terms of our ordinance.
Yeah.
Yeah,
If we take it out of the definition, then, okay, the big hot air balloon's not a sign.
you could take it out of the definition, but
But if I
You'd still have where it's restricted, and signs supported in whole or in part by water, air, or gas. To me, it's just very convoluted. What is it, in other words? Do they allow them or don't they
I
allow them?
think we need to leave it in the definition so that if somebody says, if we can say your big old hot air balloon is a sign, and right here says you can't have that kind of a sign.
Yeah, that's another way to look at it, and I
You're
agree
defining
with
They're
that. Yeah.
defining it as a sign.
Yeah.
But 4 pages over, we're
You
restricting
can't have
the
it.
definition
You can't have
of what that sign means. I tend to.
Okay.
go- I mean, I see where you're coming from. On the surface, it looks like you're allowing it on one side, but really, the definition isn't allowing anything. It's defining what all these perimeters are of signs.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
Back to the penance for a second. In order to keep this document simple, or simpler, and not duplicate all the language on penance that you have for signs, what if you just include pennants of a certain size in the signs? Just say a pennant is a sign with the exception of a pennant less than 3 square feet or something.
I think we leave penance alone. And if it became something that we noticed was being abused, like somebody couldn't fly a banner, which is definitely got restrictions and is in those tables. If they got mad and said, well, instead of flying a banner, I'm going to fly a pennant, which is, I'm going to fly a triangular piece. And I'm going to say the same thing. And it's 25 square feet. Then I think we address pennants. But I've heard from a lot of people that are freaking out that we're taking, simple yard pennants that are hanging on little.
Like Easter bunny.
I don't think we need to touch that with a 10-foot pole. I think we say pennants are not signs and leave it at that. And I think that was the intent when pennants were not going to be signs. So I hear what you're saying, but I think that we just keep it simple and say a banner is a sign, a flag is a sign, a pennant is a pennant. Anybody else have anything on page 2 that gives you any heartburn? Okay, flipping over to page 3, and we're still in the definitions. Permanent sign is the same as what we agreed at the last meeting. The sign temporary, I think has been redone slightly, hasn't it, Wes?
Yes, sir. Line 22, that strikeout where it says, the portion that's struck out, it says sign intended to display either commercial or non-commercial messages of a transitory, temporary nature.
Yeah.
According to Mr. Gallo, that would not be content neutral by
Right.
leaving that in.
And it's addressed a lot more in the tables
Right.
that we're working from. And then below the sign temporary,
The temporary period,
yeah,
that's also,
yeah. And then number 2 was basically the same as the last version, and as well as number 3. John, I remember you had some concern about the vehicle signs. Once again, this definition defines what a vehicle sign is, but I think if we were to go over to page 6 again, in the signs that are prohibited, vehicle sign pops up, but I think what you said at one meeting on this was that it should be allowed if the vehicle is roadworthy or, is licensed to operate on the road. Wasn't that something you were concerned
It
with?
sounds like that, because, yeah, I mean, I've seen over in Currituck, tractor trailers that are
Mhm.
used as signs.
Sure, yeah.
They never move.
Yeah. But if we simply leave that in there, a vehicle sign as a prohibited use, then you couldn't have, steamers written on your vehicle and park it in the parking lot out there. So I think we need to, does that make sense, Wes?
I mean, the way, they have one out there, Tropical Smoothie has a vehicle. The part in this, in the definition that I've always paid attention to is, which is displayed in public view under circumstances as to location on the premises, time of day, duration, availability, or other parking space on the premises. So by putting, if, let's say Tropical Smoothie put the van in the very front of the parking lot as opposed to on the side, I think you would treat it differently.
But it's like John said, what if they parked the old clunker out there, that didn't have a registration or license, but had a real nice looking sign painted on the side of the vehicle? I think somewhere, and probably in the prohibited use on page 6, number, what is that? I? Yeah. I, which says vehicle signs, as it's listed as a prohibited use. I would say vehicle signs on a vehicle not licensed to operate on a roadway.
Well, if that's the case, well, if it is partially dismantled or wrecked and it doesn't have a valid registration, then it's considered a junk motor vehicle. And we can cite it for that also.
Mhm.
But if you wanted to add, put that in there as well,
Okay.
you all can certainly recommend that.
Well, just as long as, I doubt we'll see a tractor trailer come in, but,
You see a
a
van,
big van,
just a regular van,
Yeah.
like a plumber's van.
So what you're saying, Wes, is that our ordinance covers a junk vehicle with a real nice sign.
If it is partially dismantled or wrecked, or it can't be operated the way it was intended, and it doesn't have a valid registration, then it's considered a junk motor vehicle.
Okay.
And that's in the motor vehicles ordinance.
Back on page 3, line 38. This is pretty interesting to me, but a delivery van. It's like, which circumstances indicate that the primary purpose of the display is to attract attention of the public rather than to serve the business of the owner thereof. Like steamers, if they've got their truck backed up to the restaurant, loading, unloading, doing whatever, that's fine. It's not really a sign. If they've got it out the very end of the parking lot out front, then it's obviously intended to attract attention of the public. So it seems to me like it's okay to have one as long as you're just not parking it out by the street, as long as you're using it actively in your business. It seems like it's okay.
And that's kind of what I was saying earlier. And it's kind of like a contractor or a Dominion truck, a lineman who drives his bucket truck home in the afternoon. That says Dominion on the side, but it's not serving the business. This is motor transportation.
Yeah, I don't have any problem with that. It's just if, I'm not picking on Collington, but they got names on boats selling fresh shrimp down there. And they got, junk cars with somebody's business, on the side of the road. That's what we want to kind of make sure we're covered on.
Well, like the cookie place, they have a van in there. Do they deliver? Do they use that van to get supplies, pick up supplies and take them up back and forth? Or is that really just intended for public display.
I would think that anything that you use in your business that is roadworthy, you could park it anywhere you wanted to on the property. But,
So if that business owner is just driving it back and forth to work, and he doesn't really use that van for the business,
yeah, right, I mean, that should certainly be allowed, and you should be able to park it anywhere you want to. But if you got this old junker that you goose up with a nice paint job and let go of your sign and you park it, what you're saying, Wes, is that if it's not registered, you can't have it on private property.
It's got to be partially dismantled or wrecked and not registered. It's got to be, both. It has to qualify in both instances.
Partially dismantled.
Or wrecked.
What does that mean? One lug nut?
Missing a tire, missing a bumper.
Okay. Well, everybody on board with what we're talking about here? It's, do we want to try to squeeze it down to language in there that says an operable roadworthy vehicle registered? Or keep moving?
I would keep, it's already in one, as Wes said, it's already covered already.
Yeah.
So if you want to put C, you put a footnote C, whatever that is, whatever it's listed under, you know, the site, you could add that in there, you know. But
Well, if we're okay on, you know, not defining what that vehicle is, then let's move on. Any more discussion on vehicles? Okay. Let's see. Page 4, anybody have anything on page 4? We did those temporary signs on, in F of less than 3 days duration located within a public right of way. That was from the last time, wasn't it, Wes? Yes. Last version. Nothing's changed there. Anybody see anything on page 4 that I think we need to talk about? Okay. On page 5, pretty much all of that has been pulled out of the existing ordinance about sign permit required, material and design inspection required, eliminated signs. And then we get to item 7, which is prohibited signs. Anybody have anything on page 7 that jumps out? I have one question, Wes, and I think I probably know the answer. The reason it's scratched is item F, which is any off-site sign, content neutral.
Correct. That was a big part of the Reed versus Gilbert case, was off-site signs.
Off-site.
You have to read, you have to read it to know where, if it's not on the same location.
Yeah. So my question is, and I'm glad our town manager's sitting here because he's well aware of a complaint or two of off-site signs. Generally, off-site signs are placed in the right-of-way. I would say most of the ones that have been plucked out of the town advertising anything, you know, power washing to cargo lifts to whatever. But those signs have been predominantly in the public right-of-way, which is not allowed, period. In the current ordinance, nor will it be allowed in the new ordinance.
Temporary signs at 3 days duration are allowed in this current draft.
Say that again?
Temporary signs of less than 3-day duration are allowed in the right of way in this draft.
That are allowed in the right of way.
Yes, sir.
Mm-hmm.
That's,
And then campaign signs, but well, all temporary signs are allowed in the right of way from before the early voting and then
Right.
up to after the election.
Yeah. We'll,
But year round, if it's less than 3 days duration, a temporary sign is currently allowed in the right of way.
without the permission of the adjacent property.
With the permission, right?
but that's a 3-day, we're talking about
No,
three.
the 3-day thing, they can put, for 3 days, they can put any sign they want in front of my house. In the right of way.
Well,
Yeah, it's in exclusions, temporary signs of less than 3 days duration located within a public right of way.
Right.
And I think that's carried forward from a previous draft as well. I think the day might have changed. I think it's, the current ordinance, I think it's 1 day. And then this somehow it progressed to 3.
I mean, in theory, I don't have any problem with it. I do have a problem with it, as a property owner that has public right of way in front of my house.
Wes, have you gotten an attorney's opinion on that?
Mr. Gallup, he reviewed that part of this draft? Yes, sir.
That you can stick a sign up in front of someone else's property?
In the town right of way, yes, sir.
3 days.
for 3 days.
Based on this
On this one.
ordinance, yes, for 3 days.
And
And currently, today, it's 1 day.
so,
I just don't,
Wow.
it doesn't seem right.
It doesn't-
well, what is the purpose of the ordinance anyway? It's for something that, similar to what happened out here this past weekend on the surf contest. It was
Right, well, and
1 day, 2
also,
day, 3 day.
and also, so another thing we looked into was the church. They have events throughout the year. They like to put signs in the right of way. The school, they have events, fundraisers. And one of the questions we had with Mr. Gallup was, is there a way that we can treat them? Is there a way that we can establish an approval process for those kind of signs, but not others? And no, that would be content neutral.
Sure.
So that is a very good point, and I'm glad you brought that up, that the purpose of the 3-day duration is in response to the events put on by the church and the school.
Yeah.
But you can't say the event put on by the church or the school can be out for 3 days, but Joe the plumber sign can only be out for 1 day.
And also really, as an adjacent property owner, I really can't, I could object, but the town can't object to any particular content, right?
Well,
Because of-
hold that thought, because when we roll into the charts, I think we can address maybe what your concern is when we get into the charts. But, I mean, there's certainly any advantage for going backwards and saying 1 day? We agreed on 3 days, I think, earlier. So, yeah, how much trouble can we get in 3 days? Not that much.
Let's test it.
Okay, so where were we? So we were
You never
on,
know with social media.
true. Let's see. Were we on page 6?
You were on page 4.
No, we can skip 4.
Oh, okay, yeah, yeah.
We're,
We went back to page 4.
we've done the prohibited signs, the off-site sign had to be taken off, but once again, an off-site sign isn't allowed in the town right of way. So they can still exist, but they have to be off the right of way. And
Temporary sign is allowed in the right of way for a 3-day duration. A temporary sign is pretty much an off-premise sign, but we can't call them off-premise signs anymore.
right,
So technically.
For 3 days.
For 3 days, yes, sir.
now, and
Yes, sir. Except during the campaign season, then all,
Yeah,
all
well-
signs, all temporary signs are fair game.
Yeah. Okay, so, we talked about vehicle signs, we're gonna move on from there. And then the signs permitted, and then from page 6 to the tables is all struck. There's nothing
Right.
in there. So we'll go to the tables next on page 10. Everybody there? Okay, table A is permanent signage in a residential district for non-residential uses. And we're looking at that type of non-residential use as churches, schools, fire stations, and country clubs. I think everything across there, we agreed to earlier that that's what we wanted to do. Nothing's changed from the last version. I got a question on, in the additional requirements, Wes, as far as signs shall not be internally illuminated. What, do we need to do anything to include the fire department in?
They were approved. Right now, in the current ordinance, I think it says signs approved by the town council are exempt. And when
Right.
they went through the conditional use permit process,
Mhm.
that was, they included the drawings for the signage, and that was approved by council. So if and when, if we were to adopt this, for example, it would be legally non-conforming.
But it had approval from council.
Yes.
on this.
But one of the changes in this is that there's no longer an exemption or signs approved by council. But either way, and that's something Mr. Gallup and I talked about as well. And it would be allowed to remain as a legal nonconformity,
Uh-huh,
this fire station sign.
okay.
But with that in there, we wouldn't be approving any other internally illuminated sign.
Right, and there's no internally illuminated signs other than the fire station that you're aware of? Internal,
In in residential zoning districts.
right.
'Cause obviously,
Sure.
commercial district, we have
Yeah,
internal.
yeah, yeah.
But in the residential districts, non-residential uses, they're
Mhm.
internal.
Anybody have anything on that first section in table A? Then the next, going down in table A, is properties owned by a civic association or property owners association. I think everything across there we were okay with on the last revision. I don't see anything there. Does anybody have any issue with table A? Okay. We'll go to table B. Major entrances to subdivisions. Once again, coming across, all the requirements were what we talked about earlier. I don't think anything has changed at all in that. Anybody have any comment, question, concern? Okay, then the next, below that, this is still permanent signage in residential district for residential uses. Single-family dwellings, vacation cottages, and duplexes are the use. And coming across that, it's everything we talked about prior. Any questions on table B? Okay, then let's roll to table C. This is all permanent signage in the commercial district. It is just what was in there before, in the last revision. I don't think anything has changed. Anything in there from the last time, Wes?
I think it's this one. Number one, yeah, there was a deletion in the additional requirements for wall signs in table C. Because Mr. Gallup stated it was arguably not content neutral because you have to review content to determine what store it advertises. So let me go back to my previous draft here. Yep, there was a number one used to say must be placed on the exterior of wall of the store it advertises. So rightfully, I agree, it's rightfully so, that should have been deleted. And I just noticed that those numbers in the current draft goes from 1 to 3, it should
Yeah.
be 1 and 2.
Yeah.
But other than that, everything else is the same.
Yeah, okay. Well, I mean, we got the gist of what the little change was. I mean, are we okay?
Yes, sir, that was
Yeah.
the change recommended by Mr. Gallup, taking out what was number one.
Okay. Tanya, it seems like you had something about a corner sign,
Corner stores are entitled to both walls.
and that's coming up in the next table or, another commercial area. I could, just thought about it.
No, it's number 2 is
Number
table
2
C.
and it's
And that,
Oh, yeah,
That-
two, yeah.
that comes from our current language.
Yeah.
That's always been that way.
All right, so anything else in table C? Okay,
Table C, cumulative sign area per lot. And then it says for group developments, 1 for every linear foot. Is that a count of signs, cumulative number of signs? Or the square footage part doesn't seem.
For group develop, yeah, so it was difficult to word this, and I understand your point. Cumulative sign area per lot, but when you say for group developments, because in the ordinance right now, it breaks it out into retail shopping centers and then freestanding lots. And the only way I could figure out to do it is say, yes, this column is for cumulative sign area per lot, but for group developments, 1 per every linear foot of store frontage for each store.
That's 1 square foot.
1 square foot of sign area per linear store frontage.
Okay, I got you.
yeah,
Okay, makes sense.
yeah,
So I'm just trying to create an exclusion for it, so to speak, in this column.
Okay, I understand.
yeah, he had the 1 in there, but, excuse me, the cumulative sign area. Yeah. Okay. You okay with that, Rob?
Oh, yeah, I understand. Sorry.
All right, table D, permanent signage in the government institutional district. I don't think anything has changed in there from the last version, has there, Wes?
I don't think
I
so.
didn't.
I don't think so. That's right.
Okay, now, we go into table E, which is getting into a little bit more of the meat of sign issues that we've had before. Table E is temporary signage, first in the residential district, and then we flip over to government and institutional commercial districts. So, on the residential district, freestanding sign, if we go across, we, at the last revisions, we went from 3.5 square feet per side to 6. There was a couple of builders that came to the town council meeting and were a bit upset that we had gone to 3.5. And so 6 is a pretty good compromise. I think we all agreed on at the last revision. The maximum height was 5 feet, maximum duration 90 days. Now, we go back to the additional requirements. Number 1 is pretty cut and dry. Temporary signs shall not be illuminated or painted with light reflecting paint or other light reflecting materials. Number 2, temporary signs shall be placed outside of the right-of-way except from 30 days before early voting begins and 10 days after an election. And I'm going to stop right there because I think that's exactly what we agreed on before, and it's pretty much dovetails with what the School of Government recommends in their campaign sign season. We can't look at it as a campaign sign. It's got to be content neutral. But if you add that up, it's about 60, on average, about 60 days and ironically, today is the beginning of the 30 days, I believe. One candidate is on it, and
Put his signs out.
I think it's 30 days exactly to October 20th, which is early voting. So we're at about 60 days in this, and that's plenty fair. I think that's a good number to work off of. What I'm having a little bit of problem with is, Wes, did you intend that to read that the permission of the adjacent property owner would only be at election time period?
Yes.
So, if that's the case, I think that at the end of where it says 10 days after an election, we put a period there. And this is a freestanding sign for 90 days duration. And then we make another requirement in that section, whether it's added onto that or a whole new number. But I think that all temporary sign placement shall have prior permission of the adjacent property owners, should be in there. Not just at campaign time, but at all times. Because Robert, what you were saying is somebody could put a campaign sign in front of your yard in the right of way, but they need your permission.
Yeah, and this one adds another wrinkle. It says temporary signs shall be placed outside the right of way.
Yes.
So this is saying you're putting it in the yard.
Right. Yeah, and
But the previous one, temporary signs can be in the right of way. The 3 days, can't they?
for 3 days and for 60 days around the campaign time, right?
I think, yeah, that is an inconsistency. One saying that you can have temporary signs for 3 days in the right of way, but this one is saying that campaign signs have to be outside of the right of way.
Right.
Except, yeah.
Except from 30 days before early voting and 10 days.
Now, I think you got it right, but to me, how it reads is if we left it as is, it would say, except from 30 days before,
Oh, yeah.
10 days after,
Yeah.
with permission of the adjacent property owners.
Right, so, yeah, it does, this still works. And then the other one is still correct as well. For 3 days, you can have a temporary sign in the right of way.
Or one thing out there, just if somebody puts a political sign in front of your yard, or they put a Joe the Plumber, what we're saying is, you can take a political sign, but you'd have to leave Joe the Plumber.
For 3 days.
Well,
And during the political period, I'd have to leave him, period.
Correct.
Yes.
You're right.
I just take care of it.
But it says that they have to have your permission as an adjacent property owner in either scenario.
During that time period.
Right. I just think that somewhere we need to have the language that says all temporary signs, no matter where they're placed, but all temporary sign placements shall have prior permission of the adjacent property owner.
I'd suggest putting a number 4.
Yes, and put that as number 4, scratch, put a period after election. And
Yeah,
then
I
add,
agree with you. I'm not sure how to rewrite it, but campaign signs are always, busy time of people complaining and irritated about it. So as clear as we can make what the rules are,
sure,
I think is important. However many,
You want me to-
however many steps we have to do.
well,
You know.
to me, this gets the ambiguity out of it because it says all temporary sign placements shall have prior permission of the adjacent property owners.
Say that one more time, all temporary signs,
All temporary sign placement
placement.
shall have prior permission of the adjacent property owner. And that's for every sign. That's not campaign signs it's.
All right, so number 4, all temporary sign placement shall have prior permission
permission.
from adjacent property owner.
Right, of the adjacent property owner or owners.
Okay. And strike out the last sentence in number 2.
Yes, just put a period after an election.
Yep. Yes, sir.
So can political signs be placed in the right of way?
Yes,
Yes, they
with your
shall,
permission, with the adjacent property owner permission.
temporary signs shall be placed outside the right of way except from 30 days before early voting begins and 10 days after the election.
Now,
Okay, now, the 3-day temporary sign. I
we have a
put on
sticky
my
note here.
property.
The 3 that's another separate category.
Yeah, 'cause it's not in the public right of way. It's only on
No, the 3 days is also in right of way.
But it still has to adhere to number 4, which says all
Yes.
temporary signs. So,
Yeah, it would still have
Yes.
to meet, by definition, it would fall under that permission. That's correct.
okay. So that's adding number 4 on, and then number 5 would,
Jay, do you have a comment?
Well, I agree with Robert about a 3-day sign and then a sign that's 30 days prior to an election. I mean, if you're just putting up a sign for 3 days, you can put it in the right of way.
during an election.
Always.
Again, and like I said, it was difficult. We couldn't figure out a way to say, we want the school and the church to be able to have signs in the right of way for 3 days. But we don't want the other ones, but you can't, that's the problem. You
Yeah.
can't do that. There's no content neutral way to do it that I can, unless you all, I mean, Ben and I talked about it and this is where we came up with.
Yeah, I think it's reasonable. Well,
Does the adjacent property owner solve the problem? I mean, because the church would put their signs, the school would put their signs, now they want to put them other places.
okay, as far as temporary signs in residential settings, we're okay to add that? Everybody okay with that? Now, I want to just, you don't have to flip back, but I'm just going to read what I read earlier about the town desires content neutral signage. And then it also reflects the aesthetics desired by its residents for signs. And I know that the candidates running this year and the candidates that ran last year sure didn't like the fact that we were kind of all over the place with what we could allow in campaign season. I think this kind of cuts to the chase a little bit better and defines what we're trying to do. But I know, living off of East Dogwood Trail, that median from the intersection all the way down to the bottom of the hill before you turn on my street on Bayberry Trail has gotten major abuse on signage in there. And it's unsightly. And right now, quite frankly, it's not legal. The signs that are sitting out there today are not legal by the ordinance that says they cannot be in town right of way. Except for 30 days. What I would like to talk about is, and I just wrote down potentially what I felt like would take care of a little bit of sign pollution in campaign season. And that would be that no temporary sign shall be placed within any traffic median of any roadway within the town. That would mean that particular spot from East Dogwood all the way up.
South Dogwood by the school.
Just south.
Duckwoods Drive has a median. North Dogwood Trail has a median. The school and firehouse area has a median. And those things get so filled up with signs. And if you do the math, 60 days is 1/6 of the year that we got to endure just this mass of signs in these medians, and they just congregate there. So if we require them to have the owner's permission, that's a big step right there in my.
What does that extend to the owner?
No, I don't know how you couldn't do owner's permission on the median. I mean, who would you contact? I think the median would have to be a separate entity, but it doesn't discriminate against signs. It just says you can't put any in there.
We can regulate size and location.
Location,
Size, location, and something else.
time,
Time, okay.
Time, place, and manner.
yeah,
Okay.
time, place.
So, place.
Exactly.
We
No,
seem to be within our rights. to
Sure.
do that.
It's definitely within the town's right to not allow any sign at any time in the median anywhere in town.
Freedom of speech, and it's election.
Well, sure, it is absolutely freedom of speech, but it's abuse, sign abuse. And last year, there was no signs in that median because the campaigns respected, but it was a local campaign. It was running for mayor and town council. This year and 2024, Katie barred the door. There's going to be a lot of signs out there. 1/6 of our year gets to have signs in right-of-ways. I think you can find a place to put a sign. It doesn't have to crowd up in a median, but that's just
Do
me.
the corners.
Huh?
What about the corners?
Yeah, corners are fine. It's just as long as you get permission from adjacent property owner, right? I mean, the median, or not the median, but the split in the road that the Civic Association owns. The president of the Civic Association last year wrote a letter to all candidates asking them not to put any signs on the triangle area, which is owned by them, or any other Civic Association property, and it worked. I mean, our mayor got elected, town council got elected, and the sign issue was tamped down. But whatever y'all feel is fair, we should certainly do.
So location, the medians, that's one suggestion, and I think that's a pretty good idea. We can regulate the number of signs.
Size.
We can regulate the size, but we're regulating the number
You
per
can.
lot.
You can regulate.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, it's size, number,
The number per lot or the number
Mm-mm.
townwide?
I don't know about townwide.
Mm-mm. No, not townwide, but per lot, you certainly can regulate.
Townwide.
And we've kind of gone through and picked reasonable numbers, I think, that in the number of signs, in the size.
Wouldn't that be great? If we could say, you can only put 20 signs out, you better pick your best spot.
Well, I
got one
can,
for rent.
I can tell you,
Three
well, not last year's,
Not 90.
not last year's election, but the election previous, one candidate had maybe 50 up the
This
median
one right
on
after
East
the other,
Dogwood.
This one right after the other.
One candidate, 50 signs up the median.
Anyway, I'm sorry I brought that up. That was a bad idea.
So what about Civic Association property that's on a corner?
They're adjacent property, so that
Yeah.
would fall under getting permission from the property owner, right, Wes?
That's the triangle you have to get. They could say no because
Well,
that's.
and they
that's their-
did.
Yeah.
They did last year.
That's-
Jeff Johnson
did.
wrote a letter to all the candidates and said, please, you do not have permission to put signs on our adjoining property.
Which is state right of way.
Pardon?
For state right of way
Mhm.
Well, yeah, but,
at the time.
yeah. Well, and it is state right of way, but they're the adjoining property owner.
Right, but we didn't have that language in our ordinance when.
Right, exactly, yeah. No, asking for permission to put a sign is not in our current ordinance. 90
Yeah.
days is, but
Right. One of the things, there would probably have to be an exception of some type, because you were saying the school. Kitty Hawk Elementary, I guess you're talking about, if that's a polling place. So you might have to put in something with if you do this, exception of polling location.
And the church and school events, they would probably want to use that median on South Dogwood
You'd
and
have-
North Dogwood.
they got plenty of land over there on the school, my God. Why do you have to put it in the median?
I think that's state law.
Mhm.
What?
Kind of trump. That what you're referring to about the kicking the camp at the day of the election and how close the signs would be built, I think that's a state law.
Yeah, what Tony was talking about. Plus, if you think about it, every campaign sign at a polling place is in the right of way anyway.
I think we're going to take signs on election day.
Yeah, now, that,
No, it's 50 feet. I believe it's, I'm not sure, but I believe it's 50 feet. You can't have signs within the polling place. You can't have any signs within the polling place. And you can't have it within 50 feet of entrance to the polling place. I'm pretty sure that's what it was when I did that. Not positive, but there is a foot limitation on that.
But I-
We have workers that day that probably oversee all that.
Yes,
and
Because that, I mean, that's pretty serious.
yeah.
I think, there's a zillion ways to chop this thing up, but, we'd be here till next year this time if we tried to include every little scenario that we see. But I think that adjoining property owner permission is big. That's a big item, and I would certainly like to see some language in our ordinance that said that no temporary sign should be placed or shall be placed within a traffic meeting anywhere in town. People get used to it. You think it's too restrictive?
Any public comment?
Yeah,
Free speech.
I think, yeah, I think you're going to have a hard time with doing that. Because if that Supreme Court decision that Clarence Thomas wrote, it actually brings up some of the things you're talking about, and I don't know. You're really, I think you'd need a legal opinion, again, over something like that. And reading that Reed thing,
Yeah.
I don't know. I think we would be jumping the gun without a legal opinion right now before we do it.
I don't have a legal opinion, but I'll say, if we're picking and choosing what part of the town right away,
Yeah.
we would allow a sign and we wouldn't allow a sign, I think that's problematic. But I think something you said earlier, if you place a sign in a line of sight, then we can take that or move
Yeah.
it for public safety reasons. But those going up East Dogwood, as unattractive as they may look, I'm not sure they, in and of themselves, pose a public safety risk.
No, I don't think so either. That's why I flipped back over and read aesthetics one more time.
Yeah.
For 1/6 of the year, it looks like hell up there to me.
Again, it's not a legal opinion, but the idea of the town deciding where in its right of way.
Yeah, I hear what you're
It's either a public
saying.
right of way or it's not a public right of way. and
Yeah.
Treat it the same.
But Cliff, the town of Southern Shores owns the streets, is that correct?
Yep.
And so theoretically, it seems like the town of Southern Shores could say, we're not allowing political signs in front of the public right of way. If you want them,
How do I know it's a political sign?
Yeah,
I'm sorry, this whole,
A sign.
these signs, any temporary signs, any temporary
Oh,
signs.
that ordinance right now doesn't
that
allow it.
If there is an adjacent property owner, not the town of Southern Shores that would allow it, fine, put it on their property. But the town of Southern Shores does not support temporary signs, period, in its right of way. Because you own all the streets.
I would love it.
You have to, well, I mean, yeah, we could say the town does not allow signs in the right of way, period, any and all signs. But that's not what's led us to this point.
No,
Here.
yeah, no.
Well, I'm saying it strictly as a, idea. Obviously, it would be the town council that would make that decision. But I'm just saying that if the town so chose that that was our aesthetic value, I think we could proceed there with a legal opinion.
No, I mean, if what you're saying is, can the town prohibit signs totally in the town right of way? The answer to that is yes.
It's either all or none.
Yeah, and so
Yeah.
that would be up for the town council to choose whether to do that. And I don't know whether they would.
Well, I hear what you're saying as far as you can't pick and choose town right of ways. But
Because, I mean, aesthetically on East Dogwood in the right of way, how is that any better or worse than aesthetically in any other right of way on the south?
Right.
I mean, I don't, I
Yeah.
don't,
I think if the town were to, in a position to allow signs in a right of way, I think it would be frowned upon to discriminate which areas of the right of way are good and which are not.
Yeah, this does single out a right-of-way that the town owns as restrictive for any sign, anytime. Just a thought.
Well,
I mean,
perhaps some council in the future may go that direction.
Well, if you all want, I mean, we can go down the line and see if yay or nay on that requirement
I've heard,
as a recommendation.
I've heard the voice of reason and experience.
I've heard the public comment.
But I would sure like to do it because I see it as visual pollution, non-aesthetic sign masses. But now I'm good. I'll, unless anybody feels strongly that that's what we should do, I'm willing to put that one on the back burner. Tony, you sound like you got some doubts.
No, I
it
think
would
we ought to
fly.
put it, this is almost reminiscent of the court decision. You know, it's very similar where there it was signs with the church,
Right.
but the church kept on changing location and, you know, and changing the signs, temporary signs. They're always temporary signs. And I think we ought to leave it the way it is as of this point.
Ed, you got any?
I don't like any of them to begin with.
Nah.
It's junky.
Well, it's something that we gotta live with for 1/6 of the year, but
I think we should wait for the council to take that up.
well, we're definitely in agreement that it's property owner decision. Whether to allow a sign or not to allow a sign in a town right of way.
The
Right?
other side of the coin is, you know, we don't know the people who are looking at these signs, didn't know the candidate, they see it, they look up the candidate. It gets people excited, it gets them to talk.
Sure.
And, you know, there is some good that comes from
Yeah.
all that. I agree with you, it's a nuisance, but it has, you know, a vibration to it, and it's election time.
Mhm.
and, so, I don't know.
Well, certainly.
There is another side of that
Yeah.
coin, there's a heads and a tails.
Yeah,
so
sure.
understand.
And I'm willing to listen to both sides, and I hear what everybody's saying, so I'll endure it for a while longer. I mean, we could put into ordinance, please don't put, you know, but that doesn't become an ordinance. It's just a plea.
You could put a sign, you could put out a sign that says, please don't put your signs in the right. in the
That's
main
right.
I did want to go back real quick, if I may, to the new number 4. All
Okay.
temporary sign placement shall have previous permission from adjacent
Prior
property,
permission.
prior permission. But I think we should clarify, it says in the right of way, all temporary signs placed in a right of way shall have prior permission. Right now, I'm just thinking, if you leave it as is, it says all temporary sign placement, it doesn't say where.
I don't think it matters.
Now, I mean, if it would either be in campaign time, that's 60 days. They can put campaign signs outside. I mean, they can put them, I mean, really, we don't have anything that says how many feet off the street they have to be.
Well, I guess the way I'm looking at it is not inside of that time frame. If it's a freestanding sign somebody wants to put in their yard for 90 days, if you want to put it in your side yard 5 feet from your neighbor's from the property line, 5 feet from your neighbor, this would technically say if your owner next door disagrees, then you can't have the sign there. On your
Okay,
own
so
property, on your own property,
Right, I see exactly what you're saying. So it needs to mention
right of way.
right of way.
Yes.
Okay, so,
So somebody wanted to put a sign 2 feet from the property line. If your
Right.
neighbor disagrees,
Yeah,
doesn't like your
yeah.
sign.
exactly. So
So it'd say all temporary signs placed in a right of
placement
way
in
shall
right of
have,
ways, right of ways,
right of ways shall have
right,
prior permission.
yes. And that would take care, I mean, I had a friend of mine that had a campaign sign put about 3 times in front of his house in the right of way, and he took it down 3 times, and the candidate got a little bit miffed, and, but that's a case in point where you just say, hey, gotta have my permission before you put this campaign sign that isn't in the right of way in front of my house. That's fair enough. Okay, so everybody good on where we're at with temporary signage in Table E? Then if we go, the banners and the flags on the next page are both straight out of the last revision.
And I will say that the flags the flags that's a challenge. It's the same with anything
Right.
else. You can you either allow all of them or none of them.
Yeah.
You can't allow an NC State or an East Carolina University flag
Right.
and not a United States of America flag. So what we've suggested and recommending is that there's no maximum number of flags. That way you could have a house divided 2 teams and
Yeah.
a United States flag and a
Mhm.
Christmas flag.
Sure. And then the maximum surface area for a single sign, or in this case, flag, would be 24 square feet.
Yeah, and I believe in one of our previous discussions, we talked about other locations where there were some offensive flags
Yeah.
that were huge.
Yeah, or it could be a banner.
Yes.
Okay. So moving down into the government, institutional, and commercial districts, that same language, Wes, that you did create a number 4 on the additional requirements for a freestanding sign as well,
In
right?
GNI and commercial, yes, sir.
That would be the exact same language.
Yes, sir. And then just might as well carry it forward.
I think banners and flags were just what we, in the government district, just what we,
Both government, institutional, and commercial, so it's both districts.
right. Yeah. Anybody see any problem with anything on that page, other than we haven't talked about at the very bottom, all districts on property where the lawful construction, alteration, remodeling, or demolition of any building or use is taking place. That basically is to allow for subcontractors to have signs on construction projects. Shall be removed upon completion of the work involved or issuance of a certificate of occupancy, whichever comes first. So I think that is squared away. Then in Table E, all districts on property where property is for sale or lease. Wes, that would be another one that you had to tweak around with Ben,
Yes,
wasn't it?
sir. For the wall sign for rent or lease,
Mhm.
he said that it requires one to look at the content to determine what is advertised. I suggest changing to be placed on the principal building that is listed for rent or lease. So that's what I've done in number 2.
Yeah, I think both of those, the freestanding sign and the wall sign, The language in there is just what we talked about in both situations.
I brought this up before on the for sale sign. If it's a corner property, and you could use the example right now of Dogwood and Duck Road, and it's on both sides. Because when there's a sale sign on a corner property, there's a tendency to put a sign. There's one right now on Duck Road, and there's one right now on Dogwood for sale. So when you have a corner property, you have to consider corner property for sale signs. So perhaps two might be more relevant than one for sale signs. It's the same as the building, like a commercial building that's on the corner. We allow the commercial sign on both sides. And I think the for sale sign should fall into that category also.
Well, how about if we put it in the additional requirement section? Still leave one up in all circumstances except for a corner. And then in the additional requirement, put number 3, language that would take in what Tony was talking about. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's what y'all like
Yeah.
recommend. So number 3 would say corner lots are entitled to up to 2 freestanding lots.
For sale, or,
Freestanding signs.
yeah, better not put for sale because that's not content neutral.
Yeah.
Or might just say corner lots may place up to 2 signs.
Yeah.
Freestanding signs.
Okay. Everybody good with that? Okay.
On a lot, I'll put that at the end.
Well, the last page of a long process. Anybody want to stretch your legs? Well,
Have a drink.
yeah.
We're almost done, right?
I would say that I think it would, once this all gets settled out with town council and they send this on into the ordinance, I think it would be wise for the town to put out a condensed version of what the sign ordinance says. And put it, on the website, put it, the condensed version, the high points, and, also send it to all political campaign offices, and the Board of Elections. I think we just need to, once we get this settled out and go through this campaign season, there's more coming. So it would make sense to show where we stand as a town, in our sign ordinance. So with that, does anybody have anything else they want to talk about in this sign ordinance?
No, I'm good.
Well, I would entertain a motion to approve with corrections and send this to town council. Or not corrections, but additions, I'm sorry.
Clarification.
As amended, recommend
As
approval
amended.
as amended
Yes.
to council.
I would entertain a
Okay.
motion to,
I'll make a motion that we approve ZTA 21-08 with the amended aspects and send it to town council.
I'll second that. Any discussion? Any discussion? All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay.
Thank you all for your input and patience on that.
Yeah, well, thank you for,
It's been almost a year.
yeah, oh, is that all? I think we got a pretty good version. Like I said, I just don't think we'll hit every little target, but we're pretty, we got an A anyway, I think. Well, let's look at ZTA 2210 and then either take a break or come back for commercial design standards next month. Okay. 22-10, Wes, you just want to give us a brief synopsis of what was found that should have been included, but we failed to include.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chairman. Next item on your agenda is ETA-22-10. At the May 19, 2022 Planning Board meeting, the board recommended a revised version of ZTA-2206, which established mixed-use group development of commercial and residential buildings as a special use in the C General Commercial District. On June 7th, the council adopted ZTA-2206 with most of the language recommended by the board, including a requirement for maximum building height, which is established in the dimensional requirement for the C General Commercial Zoning District. So for the dimensional requirements in all the zoning districts, the maximum building height is 35 feet. It's one sentence. There's a second sentence behind that says that if the average of the existing undisturbed grade at the corners of the building is less than 8 feet above mean sea level, the maximum building height may be measured from up to 8 feet above mean sea level. When the board recommended the dimensional requirements go into what the applicant was proposing, and then what council ultimately adopted, left out that second sentence of that requirement, the dimensional requirements. And the whole reason for it, when we amended the height requirements, because it used to be from the lowest corner, and there was a top plate restriction. But the whole purpose of that is so that we're not penalizing folks who have low-lying property. We have a regulatory flood protection elevation of 8 feet. Therefore, if they want to elevate their property to 8 feet, then they're not being penalized in their height. So for example, with the, let's just say it's 8 feet, they won't have to adjust the building height. So it was discovered that this was left out of that ZTA, and we are recommending that it be added, simply put.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
Building code, if I was in a low-lying area and I brought in fill to raise it up 8 feet, that certainly affects my two neighbors immensely because of the runoff. So the building code allows you to do that?
The town, and when we discussed all this, we did look into putting a restriction on fill. But currently there isn't, because for every foot that you would go over that, you would have to adjust the building height. But right now, no. But we do have a stormwater ordinance that has requirements that the property has to retain all stormwater generated by 1.5 inch rain event. We could also require them, and in most cases, if they were to do that much fill, we require them to submit an engineered stormwater plan, which we have the authority to do also from that stormwater ordinance, the lot disturbance ordinance. But no, right now, we do not have a limit on fill. They would just have to satisfy the 1.5 inch rain event requirement.
Okay, so now we're gonna see this. I mean, you have that capability of, you go in for someone buying a lot and you have two older properties and you've got this that can happen.
It can happen. Yes, ma'am.
But the intent of the language that we put in the flood stuff that we worked on was to get everything up
Above.
to 8 feet. Yeah. So in this particular property, well, we shouldn't be specific, but that's what it is. But the applicant caught the oversight and questioned why it wasn't in there. I mean, it's nothing nefarious that either side was trying to do, but it is to be able to build up to 8 feet, getting people out of the flood area.
And to get to that height, it could be fill or it could be pilings. I mean, it doesn't,
And what uses would be permitted under those pilings if the property was at 2 feet?
anything.
35-foot building height would be, you'd add 6 feet to that.
Yep.
And so you could raise it up the first level to 8 or 9 feet or whatever and park underneath it.
Yes, anything below the regulatory flood protection elevation, which we adopted a local elevation standard. Y'all will recall it applies in the X zones, but even in our AE zone, it's still 8. The only thing you can have below that is parking, access, or storage.
Mhm.
You can't have enclosed living space. All electrical has to be above. HVAC units have to be above. There are ways around the electrical if it has certain components that so it doesn't
So
produce
it could be enclosed garages and storage if you had to break away.
flood vents.
The flood vents.
No, I don't break away. That's only required on the ocean front.
Okay.
But in X zones and AE zones, parking, access, storage, flood vents are required.
Now, I think it was, certainly an oversight, and it needs to be on par with what we've got in all the rest of the zoning districts. So, staff is recommending the approval, and I don't see any reason why we shouldn't. Anybody?
No, we won't occupy the space of the floodplain.
Want to make a motion?
I move we adopt 22-10, ZTA 22-10,
As written.
as written.
Could I get a second? Linda, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor of approving ZTA 22-10 and sending to town council, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? None? Okay. All right. Um, 10-7 right now. I would certainly like to get into the mixed use, but I think we can certainly put it off to a later meeting, next month, if that's,
It would be added as old business on our next agenda.
yeah. Robert had sent some stuff out late this afternoon. If you can
I can send that out.
send that out
And
to go along with it. I looked over it briefly. I would love to call on the former manager, Nags Head, to explain himself.
Lots of 28 pages.
20 pages.
Yeah. Nice drawings.
It all happened before you got there, right, Cliff? Well, there's a lot of good stuff, but there's a lot of fluff in there too, I must say. And I'm fairly ignorant on what we can and can't do as far as the town goes, as far as regulating design in commercial applications. But I think if we do some homework and be ready to talk about it at the next meeting. Look at those three town ordinances that are out there, and maybe if I could get you all to make a list of 5 to 10 things that really stood out, that had merit, that we can talk about and possibly incorporate into, our design standards moving forward. Would that be something that we could do at the next meeting? And I'll get Wes to send a reminder out, but I think that would be a good way to approach, this topic, because, we're getting into the era of rebuild. Marshall's is certainly a good example of it. We probably didn't have much input over there, which we couldn't. But maybe moving forward in this new mixed use plan that may come to fruition, we can have a say in how we can control the aesthetics a little bit in our town. I don't know how much we can actually do, but I'm hopeful that, we come back next month and be ready to talk about it. So that's okay with everybody.
I'll make a motion that we continue the discussion of potential commercial design standards until the meeting in October.
October 17th.
October 17th.
Okay, thank you, Tony. I'll second that. Any discussion? Everybody in favor, say aye.
Aye.
We failed to do public comment when we first got here. Is there anybody from the public that needs to speak at the second public comment?
Goes to public ask.
None being seen, I will shut down the public comment. Planning board member comments. John, I'll start with you down there.
Comments?
Linda? Tony?
I'm good.
I think I've said enough. So anyway, Wes, any announcements?
Yes, sir. Communicated with, I think, everyone, all parties involved. It looks like for the appeal application, the meeting will be held October 5th, special meeting at 1:00 here in the Pitt Center.
Okay.
That will be the only agenda item. Mr. Chairman, I gave you that request. If you don't mind, just, if you're okay with it, just sign it and I can take it tonight, or you can send it to me or drop it off, whatever you're comfortable with. As chairperson, you can call the special meeting. So hopefully we'll get to that point. If any of you, for whatever reason, are unable to attend, if something comes up, please let me know it in advance.
Yeah, that's important, because can it go on with 4?
It could, it's possible, but the applicant would have to agree to it.
Okay.
So I have my surgery on the 30th of September.
Right.
October 5th will be okay. I'll let you know.
Could
So, I mean, that was
Could
part
it-
of, go ahead.
could it be a Zoom?
No, sir. It could not be virtual.
Can't do Zooms.
Since the state of emergency has been lifted, there changes have been made
Okay.
to how that works.
I can put you on speaker. Oh, you can listen in.
Okay, there we go.
So that's why it's been a challenge to get this
Yeah,
date set. And
yeah,
thank
I
you
know
all
you
again
were
for your
getting-
patience and all
But
that.
I mean, like last surgery, 2 days later, was fine. I'm getting around.
Jinx yourself.
So. I know.
Well, we'll cross the bridge when we get there. We're wheelchair accessible here if you,
Well, I'll just be on a cane again. So,
Okay. Oh, that's good spirit. All
The-
right.
The meeting, the regular meeting would be October 17th. It was just added, the commercial design standard discussion, and we may or may not have the Pledger Palace, the Pledger ZTA,
A little Freudian stuff.
Ms. Pledger's application. And we may have some more 160D changes. We'll see how that goes between now and then as well. we've got to get, we knocked out the special use 160D changes, but there's a list that we need to get to the others.
Will, town council have this, signed ordinance in front of them at the next
Now that
meeting?
you all have made a recommendation, yes, sir, I'll send I asked the Coastal Times today if I could submit the notice tomorrow, not knowing what's going to happen tonight, so they agreed to that. So yes, the signage can be put on the next council meeting agenda, which is October 4th.
Okay.
And at the last town council meeting, I emailed y'all and let you know that they approved, obviously, the preliminary plat that you all considered tonight. And they also unanimously approved ZTA-2209, which was the application for Ms. Mila Smith for the group fitness facilities. They approved that as recommended as well.
Okay,
And that's all I have.
all right. Well, I don't have anything else. I'll make a motion to adjourn this meeting.
I'll second it.
Second, third,
Third, fourth,
You got 5 votes for it.
adjourn.
like America's Got Talent, you got five.
Yeah.